chaos last December in Minneapolis as Operation Metro Surge got underway.
Quote, somebody is going to get killed. That was the disturbing warning from an agent of the Department of Homeland Security's Investigations Division that sent a chill throughout local officials here in Minnesota, including prosecutors with the U.S. Attorney's Office. The agent was worried about what would happen when Gregory Bavina and his Border Patrol agents got to this city, and the warning was tragically prophetic, as Renee Good was killed on January 7th and Alex Preddy on January 24th. This is the story and the investigation into what was going on behind the scenes between those 18 days.
Somalians ripped off that state for billions of dollars. They contribute nothing. I don't want them in our country, I'll be honest with you.
Those December 2025 comments demonizing Somalis living here in the U.S. legally would set the stage for the launch of Operation Metro Surge. The Trump administration's deployment of 3,000 immigration agents to Minneapolis and St. Paul.
Those are the general orders.
Controversial Border Patrol Commander-at-Large Greg Bavina would lead that surge come January. A man already gaining a reputation for his use of aggressive tactics in places like Los Angeles and Chicago, and being accused by a judge of lying under oath.
Beginning in December, the administration had an unprecedented wave of immigration enforcement in the Twin Cities.
What problems did it cause?
The administrations are empowered to set priorities, and that is traditional and it's appropriate. But Operation Metro Surge was different. From the beginning, it was conducted in a paramilitary posture.
This is Tom Calhoun Lopez, at the time the chief of the Violent and Major Crime Section for the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Minnesota. CNN spoke with more than a dozen former and current members of the Trump administration for this story, most of whom refused to go on the record out of fear of retaliation by the Trump administration.
Hundreds of agents were flooding in from out of district. They weren't familiar with Minnesota communities. They weren't familiar with Minnesota residents. And operationally, they were in a paramilitary posture as well. They were heavily armed. They were in masks. They patrolled in combat gear, and their ethos was of a military occupying force. Their mission seemed to be to subdue the state and to bring it to heel.
You know from occupation because you're a veteran.
That's correct. I deployed to Iraq twice, once as a field artillery officer and once as an Army judge advocate.
And it reminded you of that kind of occupation?
It did. Through two different deployments, I got to see what a military occupation looked like. And unfortunately, Operation Metro Surge had all the hallmarks of a military occupation.
We don't control the unsafe or questionable tactics by other agencies that are here.
It had become a toxic environment, and it had become a lawless environment. And from that lawlessness came chaos, and from that chaos came the deaths of Renee Good and Alex Preddy and other people being injured.
On the morning of Wednesday, January 7th, a Minneapolis mother named Renee Good dropped her 6-year-old son off at school, then went with her wife Becca to be legal observers of the immigration enforcement operations in their city.
That's fine, dude. I'm not mad at you. Show your face. I'm not mad at you. It's okay. We don't change our plates every morning, just so you know. It'll be the same plate when you come talk to us later. That's fine. U.S. citizen. You want to come at us? You want to come at us? I say go get yourself some lunch, big boy. Go ahead.
Out of the car. Get out of the fucking car. Get out of the car.
Oh! What did you think when you first saw the video?
We were getting updates as they happened. We got the video as soon as we can. Obviously, the video speaks for itself. It's troubling.
Immediately following the shooting, senior prosecutors in the Minnesota U.S. Attorney's Office did what was standard operating procedure. They ordered an investigation into the shooting, whether Renee Good's civil rights had been violated. For a brief moment, it looked like a joint investigation would happen between the FBI and local authorities. But the Trump administration had different plans.
This appears as an attempt to kill or to cause bodily harm to agents, an act of domestic terrorism.
In addition to those highly questionable comments from then Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, President Trump quickly took to Truth Social and made demonstrably false claims, saying Good was, quote, very disorderly, obstructing and resisting, who then violently, willfully, and viciously ran over the ICE officer, who seems to have shot her in self-defense, adding, it is hard to believe the ICE officer survived.
This is the site where Renee Good died. the investigation was shut down into the shooting.
That's correct. The President and the Secretary of Homeland Security both announced that there would be no investigation. Secretary Noem referred to Renee Good as a domestic terrorist, and I've certainly seen no evidence of that whatsoever.
And had you ever seen anything like that happen before, where the President weighs in on a shooting?
Never. Under normal times, an administration would have no objection to an investigation because the investigation may clear the officer. An investigation isn't necessarily designed to indict anybody.
U.S. Attorney Daniel Rosen was in Washington, D.C. at a conference. So the second in command of the U.S. Attorney's Office, Joe Thompson, who was worried that the presence of Homeland Security agents on the street, ICE, Border Patrol, CBP, would inflame matters, made a request to the feds to remove them. That request was honored. Briefly.
They are already trying to spin this as an action of self-defense. I want to tell everybody directly, that is bullshit. To ICE, get the fuck out of Minneapolis.
In the U.S. Attorney's Office, staffers grimaced, knowing Mayor Fry's comments weren't going to help. But even before those comments, prosecutors worried about how the Trump administration would handle this shooting. By the end of the day, the FBI was no longer working with local authorities on the shooting investigation, and Homeland Security agents were back on the streets. On Thursday, January 8th, the day after the Renee Good shooting, tensions between the prosecutors in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Minnesota and the Justice Department began. Justice Department officials wanted the prosecutors to claw back a warrant they'd obtained for Renee Good's car, a warrant predicated on an investigation as to whether Renee Good's civil rights were being violated. DOJ officials in D.C. wanted the charges to be against Good for attacking the ICE officer. The Justice Department, led by the Office of Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, also wanted Good, and to a different degree her widow Becca, investigated. But the Minnesota prosecutors would not carry out those actions. On Monday, January 12th, 5 days after the death of Renee Good, Minnesota's U.S. Attorney Daniel Rosen returned to the office, and he told prosecutors that the marching orders from D.C. were to investigate Good for an assault on a federal officer, and he also suggested they take some investigative steps regarding Good's widow, Becca, instructions the prosecutors thought were madness.
Does it make sense to investigate somebody for assault on a federal officer if they're dead?
It did not make sense to me at the time. It didn't make sense to any of us. It doesn't make sense to me today.
Also that day, Greg Bovino demanded a phone call with the U.S. Attorney's Office. Bovino was angry that prosecutors had not been filing cases against protesters whom he had claimed and his agents had claimed were assaulting officers and agents.
You assault an officer and you're going to jail.
What Bovino said on the call stunned the prosecutors. Quote, "These people are wackos," Bovino said about Minnesota protesters. "This shit is getting ready to come. We're not going to calm it down. We're going to put it down. We're going to pacify this place. We're going to roll them up." Bovino also made a comment about Rosen, the U.S. attorney, who's an Orthodox Jew, sneeringly referring to him as one of the chosen people, a comment prosecutors found anti-Semitic. After the call with Bovino, one of the prosecutors said, quote, "They're going to kill someone else." Others agreed. On Bovino's claims that immigration officers were being assaulted and charges weren't coming, well, those cases had been going to Tom Calhoun Lopez.
Law enforcement officers have a difficult job, and federal agents do their job very, very well. So it's important that prosecutors protect them where they can. And that means vindicating their rights if they're victims of assault. But I began to have concerns that agents were not being truthful, making arrests with very little provocation, and then soon enough, no provocation. And even after that, I would learn that agents had instigated physical contact, and so they were arresting people not only who had committed no assault, but who had in fact been assaulted by federal agents.
The result of the false claims and the chaos in Minneapolis would soon reverberate inside the Minnesota U.S. Attorney's Office.
We investigate when it's appropriate to investigate, and that is not the case here.
Tuesday, January 13th, 6 days after the killing of Renee Good, was a pivotal day here at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Minneapolis. Pushed so hard and so far by the Trump Justice Department to do things that they found unconscionable, even immoral, 5 prosecutors, including 4 top prosecutors, resigned in protest.
6 prosecutors who suddenly decided they didn't want to support the men and women in ICE. So they came, they said, we want to resign. So the breaking news tonight, I fired them all.
Attorney General Bondi goes on Fox and claims that she fired you. What was your response when you heard her say that?
I know what happened, and if it made the Attorney General feel better to say that she had fired us, that was okay with me. I never intended to leave the U.S. Attorney's Office. It was my dream job. It's why I went to law school. It was the greatest professional privilege of my life, but I could no longer stay.
The next evening, January 14th, another shooting.
What we saw was 3 individuals weaponize shovels and brooms and attack an ICE officer that had to defend himself.
DoorDash driver Alfredo Alejandro El Horna fled in his car when he realized he was being followed by ICE agents, returning home where he lived with his cousin. Footage of the incident shows El Horna being tackled by ICE agent Christian Castro before a brief struggle. When El Horna and his cousin Julio Cesar Sosa Celes, both in the country illegally, run towards their home, you can see the agent appear to fire his weapon toward the entryway. He hit Sosa Celes, who was not the target of the pursuit. He hit him in the leg. As with the shooting of Renee Good, the video told a different story from what authorities initially claimed. The ICE agent was later charged with 4 counts of second-degree assault and 1 count of falsely reporting a crime. Saturday, January 24th, was 17 days since the death of Renee Good, the culmination of weeks of chaos and cover-ups in Minneapolis.
6 months ago this Friday, a VA intensive care nurse named Alex Preddy was right here on Nicollet Avenue in Minneapolis. He'd been protesting the immigration enforcement events, but he was out here as an observer filming. Immigration agents pushed a woman to the ground. He said, "Are you okay?" and helped her up, at which point immigration agents swarmed him. He had a weapon, he had a permit for it, it was holstered, it was taken from him before any shots were fired, and then at least 10 shots were fired into the body of Alex Preddy, right here on the ground. At no point had he been resisting arrest.
When they tried to get him to disengage, he became aggressive and resisted them throughout that process. These officers used their training, followed their protocols, and were in fear of their lives and the people around them.
I was not with the U.S. Attorney's Office when this happened, but the video is shocking, and I would think as an American citizen that there would be a full investigation, and there would be some accountability.
Are you surprised there hasn't been any sort of result?
I wish I could say I'm surprised. I'm certainly dismayed.
The shooting of Alex Preddy was widely seen by prosecutors and former prosecutors as bad, as prosecutable. It was, one former prosecutor told me, an execution, a summary execution. It's that simple, unquote. And yet, local officials were kept from the scene of the shooting by federal officials. And 6 months later, still no charges have been brought against the officers who killed Alex Preddy right here.
My big fear is that we'll be 12 months from the day of the shooting and we'll be right in the same place.
That's Steve Slisher, attorney for Alex Preddy's parents.
This is a family who lost their only son and watched this unfold on TV. Would never contacted by the government to even inform them that this had happened. They haven't been treated with respect or dignity.
How worried are you that we're now in a world where there is no accountability for police officers or any sort of law enforcement or immigration enforcement agent?
I don't think the citizens of this country are going to accept that. We certainly don't accept it. Alex's parents don't accept it. We demand accountability and transparency for Alex's killers.
He loved this country, but he hated what people were doing to it.
While the Trump administration and our nation have largely moved on from these tumultuous 18 days in Minnesota, the Preddy family and the Good family still live every day with their losses. Meanwhile, the Trump administration's immigration enforcement policies continue to be criticized for being overly aggressive to the point of unnecessary state-sanctioned killing. They're criticized for agents lying and for administration cover-ups. As of now, the status of any federal investigation into what happened in Minneapolis with Renee Good and Alex Preddy remains unclear.
CNN reached out to former Border Patrol official Greg Bovino. He disputes the characterization of that January 12th phone call. He says that though he could not recall his exact words, the idea that he would say he would put down protests was not something he would say. As for the chosen people comment, he denied that it was intended to be anti-Semitic. He says he was simply frustrated he had not been able to reach U.S. Attorney Rosen on the Sabbath. As we look back on those chaotic 18 days in Minnesota, it's worth noting that so many of the Trump administration's immigration enforcement policies, which contributed to the killings of Renee Good and Alex Preddy 6 months ago, still have not changed since those tragic deaths.